right, let's hop on and take a ride with today's deep dive. We're going global, folks, exploring the world of cycling with this super interesting study. It spans 17 countries, 6 continents, really trying to understand who's on those bikes, why are they riding, and how far are they going?
It's pretty wild, actually. This isn't just like a simple bike count on the street corner.
Right.
This is diving deep into demographics, motivations, even like how far people are willing to go on 2 wheels.
Yeah.
It really paints this incredible global picture of cycling across cultures.
That's so cool. So, like, first impression, the thing that kind of blew me away was the huge KE range in cycling levels across these different places. I mean, we're talking the Netherlands. Almost 27% of trips are by bike.
Yeah.
And then you compare that to places like Brazil and the USA, where it's barely 1%.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, that's a massive difference.
It really is. And it goes beyond just the numbers, right? Like, if you try to imagine what those numbers mean for the city-states themselves, picture yourself in Amsterdam or Osaka, where almost 29% of trips are by bike. You can practically feel the breeze, the energy.
Totally.
It's a different world.
Makes you wonder what it would take for other cities to kind of catch up.
Yeah.
What are they doing right in those high cycling havens?
Well, this study had some pretty fascinating insights there.
Okay, lay it on me.
One thing that really jumped out was how it challenges the assumption that most people are just cycling to commute, you know? That image of the, business person, helmet on, zipping through traffic to get to work.
Yeah, the classic stereotype.
Totally. But it turns out that's not the whole story at all.
Oh, really?
Yeah. In some of these high cycling nations like the Netherlands, Japan, Germany, leisure cycling is huge. It's just as common, if not more so.
Yeah.
People are hopping on their bikes to enjoy the outdoors, explore their city, just have fun.
That's so cool. So it's not just about practicality. It's integrated into their, I guess, their lifestyle, their way of life.
Yeah, absolutely. It speaks to a culture where cycling is seen as, enjoyable, accessible. It's not just a means to an end. And that raises some interesting questions about why it's not like that everywhere.
For sure, yeah.
Yeah.
I know another thing that kind of caught my eye was that consistency in trip distance. Like,
Yeah.
no matter the country's overall cycling level,
Right.
they found that people are far more likely to choose a bike for a trip if it's under 5 kilometers.
Yeah, that's a really crucial insight. It kind of suggests that even in those super car-centric places, there's this hidden potential for short trip cycling.
So focusing on making those shorter trips bike-friendly could be the key.
It could be a total game changer, even if you can get people to choose their bike for, those errands, trips to the park, just visiting friends down the road. That could have a ripple effect on overall cycling numbers.
Yeah, I love that. Okay, so let's talk about who's actually out there on those bikes. This study found a pretty fascinating link between higher cycling rates and a more diverse group of people actually riding, especially when it comes to gender.
It's a really interesting trend. In places where cycling is already popular, you see women just as likely, sometimes even more likely, to be out there riding.
That's pretty powerful. So building a cycling culture that's welcoming to everyone, regardless of gender,
Yeah.
that seems like it might be key to boosting those overall numbers.
Makes you think, what are those high cycling places doing that makes women feel so comfortable and safe choosing to ride? Yeah, it's a big question, right? It suggests that it's not just about slapping down some bike lanes and calling it a day.
Totally.
We have to think about those perceptions of safety, like you said, how the infrastructure meets different people's needs. And even, cultural norms, there might be places where there's just this, unspoken discouragement for women to cycle.
Yeah, those hidden barriers, right? Like maybe there's nowhere to lock up a bike with a child seat, or I don't know, maybe there's this idea that the gear isn't stylish enough.
Oh, for sure.
There's a whole social layer to this, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not just gender either. This study also looked at age and cycling habits. Some pretty revealing stuff there, too.
Yeah, the age thing was interesting to me because, it's clear that older adults are kind of underrepresented when it comes to cycling overall.
Yeah.
But they're actually much better represented in those high cycling places, which, again, makes you think about safety and infrastructure.
Totally makes sense, If you don't feel safe or if the infrastructure isn't built for you, you're less likely to hop on a bike no matter how old you are.
Yeah. And yet there's this interesting contrast with kids, right? Like the study found that in certain high cycling cities, especially in Germany and Finland, kids are actually overrepresented. It's almost like they figured out how to make it super kid-friendly.
It really does seem that way, doesn't it?
Yeah.
I'm guessing it's a combo of things. Separated bike paths, lower speed limits in neighborhoods, and maybe just that cultural encouragement from a young age, you know?
Right.
It builds that sense of comfort and confidence for kids to get around on their bikes, even on their own.
They just grow up seeing it as normal, not risky or unusual.
Exactly. It becomes just part of life. It's fascinating because, this study actually went a step further and kind of categorized countries and cities into 5 distinct cycling typologies based on all these different factors.
Oh, wow. Okay. Break those down for me. What did they find?
Well, one thing that really pops out is that in those low cycling clusters, you see this link with inequality, like across the board in terms of gender and age. So you tend to see fewer women and older adults cycling in those environments.
So it's like cycling is seen as less accessible or less desirable for certain groups in those places.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. And then you have the middle ground, the medium cycling clusters. They often show lots of kids on bikes, which is great.
Right.
But it doesn't always translate to success in terms of overall cycling adoption.
Interesting. So just because you see lots of kids out there doesn't mean you've got a thriving cycling culture.
Yeah, it doesn't guarantee it, no.
Yeah.
And then, of course, there's the high cycling groups, which seem to point to the fact that you need more than just bike lanes,
Right.
It's about societal support, that cultural acceptance, that feeling of safety and accessibility we've been talking about. Think about the Netherlands, like the classic example.
Yeah, it's like all those pro-cycling forces aligning perfectly.
Yeah.
But of all the cities and countries they looked at, was there one that really stood out? Maybe a surprise or like a shining example?
There was one that really caught my attention, Bogota, Colombia.
Bogota. Really? Why Bogota?
Well, it's considered a lower income city, right?
Yeah.
But they've actually managed to really boost cycling levels in the past few years.
Huh.
They've done some cool things like ciclovia.
Ciclovia.
They close down major streets to cars on Sundays and holidays, turn them into these giant bike paths. They've also invested a lot in dedicated bike lanes and bike sharing programs.
Wow. So it really shows that change is possible, even when there are challenges.
Absolutely. Bogota shows that if you have the right infrastructure, community engagement and political will, you can really shift the transportation landscape pretty quickly.
That's so inspiring. It's like they created this blueprint for other cities to follow, showing that a bike-friendly city isn't just some impossible dream. It can be done.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. This study, as amazing as it is, doesn't actually tell us why these patterns exist.
Yeah.
It just shows us that they do.
And that's where things get really exciting, don't you think? We've got this global picture, this snapshot of cycling around the world. But now it's up to each of us to kind of apply that knowledge to our own communities.
Yeah, it's like we've got all these puzzle pieces now, and it's time to see how they fit together in our own cities.
Right. And it starts with asking the right questions. Like what are those barriers to cycling where you live? Is it the infrastructure? Is it, I don't know, cultural norms? Or maybe there are like opportunities to make cycling more appealing, easier for people.
It's a lot to consider. But I think the biggest takeaway, the thing that gives me hope, is that change is possible. Bogota proves that, right?
Oh, absolutely. And it doesn't have to be some huge citywide revolution either. Sometimes the smaller changes, the little things, can make a big difference. Like maybe you could advocate for a new bike lane in your neighborhood or organize a group ride. Or even just, set a good example. Choose your bike for those little trips when you can.
You know what? I'm totally inspired to look at my own city with fresh eyes now. See what we could be doing better.
I think that's a great step. We've dug into these global trends, the fascinating dynamics at play, but ultimately, the power to make a difference lies in our own backyards,
So what will you do? Are you ready to get those wheels turning?
Oh, I am.
Awesome. Well, that brings our global cycling adventure to an end for today. Hopefully, this deep dive has given you a new perspective on cycling around the world, and even more importantly, some inspiration to make your own community a little more bike-friendly. Until next time, everyone, happy cycling.